is based on, and it's a presentation of a Sufi work. The name of that work is Journey to the Lord of Power, a Manual on Retreat. And this is presented by Jean.
Mm, Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Jerry. Much of what you said truly applies to this poem of actual experiential encounter. Um, are these slides clear on the screen, Tom? Okay, great. Uh, there is so much that could be said in regards to this, but the title speaks tremendously. It is a journey, it's inward, it is to the Lord of power, and we've got to be aware that any true mystical work that holds esoteric truths, as Jerry shared, will not be plain. They will not be clear always. And that goes for this work. It is poetic, as Ibn Arabi, the author of this work, was a poet. It is mystical because he was a mystic. It is philosophical because he was a philosopher and a great teacher. And the other thing that we've got to be aware of is that this is a retreat. We typically think of retreats as going away, locking ourselves up, sometimes for months, sometimes for years. And yes, we can do a retreat that way, but we can also do a retreat every day, every moment. And one of the key points that he emphasizes that we won't be able to actually point to all the time is his emphasis on, and excuse the pronunciation if it's incorrect, dhikr, Dhikr, which is the constant remembrance of God. And whoops, okay, we are as usual stuck. Ah, there we go. In order to set the tone, I mean, I wish I could read the entire 45, 48 pages to you because they just flow with beauty and inspiration. And this is all based on the Quran, again, which Jerry mentioned as one of those sacred texts. And Ibn Arabi is truly devoted to his God, to his Allah. But he also recognizes within these words and within this work that each one has their own God, and that is sufficient. And so, to set the tone, let's read this, and we can read it together as you look at these words. In the name of God, most beneficent, most merciful, praise is due to God, the giver and originator of reason, ordainer and institutor of the transmission. His are the grace and the might. From him are the power and the strength. There is no God save he, Lord of the tremendous throne. And may the peace and blessings of God be upon him in whom, whoops, be upon him in whom are established the signs of guidance. And we keep doing that. Excuse my fingers. Um, okay, the signs of guidance. And I will have this cut off. So let me read from the papers here. Whom he sent with the light by which he guides and misleads whom he wills, and upon his noble family and pure companions until the day of judgment. And this next phrase he wrote because it was a friend who asked him to speak to the nature of retreat. And he says, I shall answer your question, O noble friend and intimate companion, concerning the journey to the Lord of power. May he be exalted, and the arrival in his presence, and the return through him, from him, to his creation, without separation. Certainly there is nothing in existence except God Most High, his attributes and his actions. Everything is he, and of him, and from him, and to him. If he were to be veiled from the world for the blink of an eye, the world would vanish at one stroke. Know, O noble brother, that while the paths are many, the way of truth is single, but it will vary with the varying conditions of its seekers. And he goes on to start the introduction, and my computer has its own way of doing things, into this retreat. And he reminds us that we are in this world of darkness, the realm of responsibility, of trial, of toils, of terrors and test. And essentially, we're talking about the world of suffering and karma with moments of joy. And he tells us in terms of preparation by study, by constant seeking, by prayer, by contemplative meditation, which is different than meditation, and dhikr, the remembrance of God in everything we do, in every moment of our lives, in every breath that we take. This remembrance in and of itself creates a constant cleansing inwards and outwards, a body, of mind, of soul, and spirit. And we typically don't think about the cleansing of spirit, but it becomes necessary in order to live life rightly. And the development of morality and virtue and service. And that service is always for the humanity. And in terms of our cognitions, the development and the purification and the cleansing of discrimination, of discernment, of truth, of charity, of love, compassion, and always that devotion that lives in dhikr. And with constant withdrawal from the world and people. And yet that withdrawal cannot be leaving people. And in the process of remaining in the world but not of the world and going into retreat constantly, we are warned to always beware of the deceitful ego. And there is not a spiritual text that does not point the way towards that same danger in terms of our awareness. And he says that during this retreat, in order to be clear of what we are doing, he will explain to his friend, as he says, may Allah grant you success. Always, God, Allah, dhikr, is before all things. He will describe the journey to him. And we have to put that word him in quotes because, as you will see, as he reveals this ascent, there are different degrees of him that are revealed. He will reveal the whole process and procedure for arriving to him, then standing before him. Then what he says as you sit on the carpet of his vision. Again, think about the beauty that is inherent within the sound of the words and the ideas that they point to. This work, as he expresses it, takes one away from any common conceptuality that we experience day to day as we're contemplating this inner retreat. Once we're sitting on that carpet, then there is the process of return from him. Return, yet not without the presence of his power and actions within our being. Absorption in him, and him absorbed within our own being. And that absorption, which is a station less than the station of return. And we'll see that there are those that get lost and drunk, as he expresses it, in the what we might call samadhis and in the blisses of light and wisdom that are revealed. And yet, as he is fond of saying throughout this entire work, if you do not stop with this and you continue, and we are familiar with that by the terms neti neti, we will not stop, because none of these things are what we are seeking. And he will bring us to the station of return and the final return. But before any of this can occur, there is that cleansing that must be developed. And the signs of that cleansing that are developed are what he calls a covenant of trust with God. And the sign that one experiences are four. One is the ability to cross the earth. The other, the ability to walk on water. The other, the ability to exist in the air. And then finally, the ability to be fed by space. And when we contemplate just those four characteristics, again, theosophically, we can talk about those lower planes and the vehicles that we developed, and yet none of those are the gold. Neti neti, if you do not stop with that trust, then we enter into a space where the realms are revealed. And instead of the planes of existence that we speak about in their natures theosophically, he describes 6 realms, obviously all composed in the 7th, but he describes them as realms that have sub-realms, states, and stations. And the stations are greater than the states. The states are the states of consciousness that the adepts achieve. The stations are what the prophets master. And then there are those that are beyond the prophet. And he says they are 6 in number that we have to be familiar with. That of pre-existence, poetically is expressed as that state in which you knew I was your father. Think about that. Beautiful. The second, the world we are now in, which most of us are pretty much familiar with. The third, intervals of the lesser and greater deaths. And just for framing, for those that are familiar with page 200 of the Secret Doctrine, those lower 4 planes, those 3 higher planes, can be used as a framework for a lot of what is being expressed, even in terms of the lesser and the greater deaths. And then resurrection on the awakened earth, not this earth. but an awakened earth. And then the garden and fire. And then the sand dung, where the creatures, as he says, are at the time of the vision of God, glorious and exalted. It is outside the garden. And the one thing that Ibn Arabi tells us is that because the nature of these teachings are so sacred, we have to be careful as we read these teachings because they are not as they seem. They are not necessarily in the order that they are supposed to be in. And sometimes things are expressed incorrectly, all for the purpose of misguiding those that are not true in the pursuit of dhikr, in the pursuit of the ultimate truth, which is nothing less than God. Once we have an idea of the realms and the grounds that we will be traveling through, the states, the stations, the encounters, he tells us that God will always test our motive. And our motives are tested by the things that he places before us. Those things embrace knowledge, visions, wisdom, experience, power. And this ascent then begins with God placing before the seeker the entire mineral kingdom, the animal kingdom, the human worlds. And by that, he explains the purposes, the causes, the relationships, the potencies, the powers, and the abilities that all of these kingdoms bring to the life of existence. And again, if we think about Isis Unveiled, Book 2, and how HPB talks about the propositions of magic, so much of that is inherent within just these terms. He says God will show the infusion of the life force into all things. And we know that prana pervades all things and is affected by and affects all things. And then the surface signs, the matrices and forms. And it doesn't take too much imagination to understand the astral nature of all things, the matrix that exist, the connections, interdependencies, networks that are there that form the very basis of the geometry of the universe. And all of this is revealed before one. If one is not set on the truth, one becomes caught up in the sciences and the speculations, and they have failed the test. And then the light of scattering sparks. And there are several ways that we can understand the scattering sparks, depending upon what the context of the retreat is at the time. And these might be anything from the elementals through the devas to the very monadic souls that sparkle throughout, that illuminate, that we become enamored by and absorbed into if we are not able to say neti neti, or if we are not able to persist in dirk, as he says. And then if we can get through just those, he begins to reveal before us in this ascent. And again, keep page 200 in mind, the four lower planes up through the seven. He says the realm of the ascending stars and form of the universal order. And we have to consider how the universal order would be present at this stage, but nonetheless, he presents it here. And the ascending stars. And the stars we can think of literally, we can think of as prose and look at the stars in the sky, or we can look at the souls that those stars represent and the forms that are inherent within the very universal structure of cosmos. And he says, you will have a full realization of God, seeing God in all things. And he explains that when we see God in all things, we are seeing throughout this entire universal order, in this journey, in this ascent, that God is present, that God is pervasive, that God is inherent, and that there is nothing but God. And if you persist, and as he says, you do not stop with this, you will see and find God in the heart, as should be your will in the heart, to find and seek out nothing but God. And in that process, you will surpass all of the speculative truths that are typically affiliated with the philosophers and the philosophies and the theories and the theorems, because the wisdom of God has nothing to do directly with the speculative, mundane, transcendental, though not supreme truths. And if you do not stop with those revealings, and we have to remember that revelation is not something given by a divine being, but that which is revealed within our own nature as we persist in moving towards the heart of life. And that heart of life, as well as the boundaries of life, is dhikr, the remembrance of God. And if you do not stop with that revealing and that degree of knowledge and that degree of wisdom, there is a knowledge of the divine names and sounds of both manifest life as well as the unmanifest life. And then we think of this as so beautiful. He reveals the proper way of conduct in all things, how we live in accordance with karma, how we do not commit error, how we are in sync with nature. And if we do not stop with that, we are shown the approach to him, the standing with and in front of him, the exchanging of life with, and the leaving from. And again, we have to ask ourselves, where are we? If we think of that page 200, where are we? Because we are not even halfway through the journey. We are not even halfway through the ascent, and yet we are encountering the divine and that which is God. And then he says, if we do not stop with that, there is a realization of how to receive divine knowledge directly from God Most High. That means when you want it, it's there. Directly, no intercessions, no intervening beings, no prayer to any other thing except dhikr. And if we do not stop with that, there is a knowing of the relations between spirits and physical bodies, the genesis of all things. In other words, how what we might say that immortal monad is, when using a mind, able to enter into physical forms that are developed according to karma. And then, if we do not stop with that knowledge, there is the infusion of the divine mystery and the throne and the essence. And we know that at each plane and at each state and in each realm and at each station, these mysteries are repeated. And so there is continually the ascent, and yet if we do not stop with the encounter, with the absorption, with the assimilation, with the understanding, then we encounter the beauty, the symmetry, and the harmonies of not form, but the holy form, along with the vital breathings of those forms. And we are taken so far above anything that we typically think of day to day. And he says here at the bottom, sorry, this is what makes true poets and preachers. They are inspired and fired by that divine mystery. And it can't be denied. And then he says, if you do not stop with that, we have only transcended, if we look at page 200 again, the lower four planes. Because now we have left the realm of the left and we are moving to the realm of the right. And the realm of the right is, as he says, the degrees of Kwak, which is the place of the heart. And we understand that the heart means many things. And each of those hearts have to be embraced, and each of those hearts have to be penetrated. And he says, in the heart we come to know the infinities, the eternities, and the order of all existences, and how being is infused into them. And we've already been at a station lower than this. And HPB talks about how divine mysteries and eternal mysteries are reflections of each other. She does this in Pistis Sophia and does it so well in terms of the explanation. And we are seeing it again here. And if we do not stop with that, we are given divine wisdoms, the power to preserve them, to live them, to understand them, to experience them, and to transmit them to those that are worthy. And over the veil and the veiling of truth or the unveiling of truth for those that are worthy, and over the foundation of higher differences and opposites. And if we do not stop with that, he reveals the unveiling of truth, the most perfect of truth. And at this point, we meet up with the true nature of the esoteric inner schools. We have so far transcended so many planes of existence and so many realms and so many stations, and it is only here that we begin to appreciate the reality of esoteric schools. And he says the revealed right traditions, those traditions that are the type for every other tradition that has come into relative existence, and the holy knowledges and the beautiful adornments of those knowledges. And then even further, if we do not stop, the world of dignity, which is law, serenity, firmness, the enigmas, the paradoxes, the secrets, and the treasures of works in the highest of heavens. And if we do not stop there, we are seen or introduced to the gardens and the hells. And we have to be careful because Typically on the lower planes, we talk about the after-death states, etc., and the devacons, and we have so far transcended that, although its reflection exists on those lower planes. And in coming to understand those gardens and hills, we understand their causes and effects, the sanctuaries of spirits absorbed in divine vision, eternal visions, supreme visions, which have nothing to do with Devachan. Then a light in which is only yourself. And he says, the greatest love seizes you, and you find bliss with God. And we put in the question, where are you? Because surely we are not here. Then the throne of mercy, and that throne of mercy is very similar to HPB's paradigmatic image of the entire multiverse. And he says, no world or essence remains that you do not witness in that station. And if you do not stop there, he reveals, and for those that are familiar with that logoic triad, you might understand or relate his understandings of the tablet, the pen, the mover of the pen, which is God's will, the cloud as the seat of the Lord, the substratum of all possible existences, all possible states of consciousness, and the ground of the space and degree in him who does not enter into any place or degree. The names of the transcendent, the essential oneness of all being. And if you do not stop with that, the next step is one, as he says, of being eradicated. And we won't even try to explain these, but just to feel them, to be eradicated in God, to be withdrawn in God, to be effaced and crushed and obliterated in God. And yet you have not been taken away, but you are now affirmed and made present, and you remain, and you are gathered together in your true essence, and you are assigned a place in the kingdom. And the robes of honor which your degree requires are conferred. And HPB talks about those robes in pistis. And of those who return with their robe of honor and wisdom and love and compassion with the duty to serve, he says, some are given one word and one name, as in one Dian Chohan. Some master several. Then there are those that are given all words and all names, all wisdom, which we might consider is the state of the Mahatma, to be used in the service of others. And he says, may Allah, praise be his name, always be their light and guide. That is the journey to the Lord of Power by Ibn Arabi. And we can't do it justice, so we suggest you contemplate it on your own. Thank you.